Hello and welcome to my channel. So last week was a pretty interesting week in the world of social media. One of the great things about having a YouTube channel is you can kind of watch things begin and then sort of build momentum, come to a spectacular and violent climax, then usually there's an anticlimactic resolution to everything. And by the time we're ready to talk about it over here on YouTube, which is different than other platforms, because if something's going down on, let's say, Twitter, and you have a TikTok platform, you can just pop yourself up in the bed, get your tiny mic, and start talking in your bonnet, over whatever's happening behind you. But over here on YouTube, it works a little bit differently. I know me personally, it takes me longer to put together a YouTube video. And I like that because, especially in situations like this, it's really important to get all the perspectives and all the information. Now, sometimes it can backfire because you think you know everything, but something new is happening after you thought it was already done. Sometimes it backfires, but for the most part, it's good to be able to cover things over here because not only is the concept now evergreen and not just driven by an algorithm that picks things up and then puts it down and people move on to the next thing, but also it provides a nice little bookend for whatever situation it was and some good, I think, final takes on the whole bit. You saw the title. You know that in this video, I'm going to be talking about the concept of Black audiences not supporting their own or our own. This concept was brought to the forefront by two very different Black creators last week. The first was the one, the only Mr. Lenny Kravitz. He came out with a soundbite saying that he doesn't feel that Black media has ever fully supported him because he's in like the fourth decade or third decade of his career. He's never been on the BET Awards. He was never invited to the Source Awards. He's never been in, according to him, like certain publications. And he just feels like he's done all of these great things with music and the Black community has never really supported him. And the second person to bring up this concept, literally, I think it was just by happenstance, maybe a day or so after Lenny said what he said, was a content creator she goes by her first and last name over on TikTok. And in her opinion, it's better to have a white audience than a predominantly Black audience because Black audiences do not know how to support their creators and creatives, and she was tired of it. As you can guess, both comments made a splash. I'm going to talk a little bit about Lenny, but I'm going to talk a lot about Winnie. As a Black content creator, as a Black female content creator, who was kind of in the same lane as her for a little bit as far as like what I would be willing to talk about on the internet, I understood or understand the frustration of not seeing your career go where you think it should go. However, I want to say boldness with which she stated her opinion and her surprise at how the internet blew back on her, I think it should become a kind of a golden rule. All of us, any of us that create content are this close to being in the center of a massive internet pylon. And no matter how many times it happens, people still run into the same snags and still make the same mistakes. And I think it's really interesting. And so I wanted to talk about it. Let's talk about Lenny Kravitz first and this concept of Black audiences and Black media not supporting him. So we all know, especially if you happen to be a Black person that is watching this, or if you've studied Black audiences and how they respond to different types of media, we all know that there is music and there are songs and there are artists that are considered Black artists. How many times have you heard, if you're paying attention, that a certain artist does not make music for us? They said it about Lizzo. They said it about Whitney Houston when she was younger. It's not an old concept. It's not an old idea. And Lenny Kravitz is not the first person to say, as a Black artist, I don't feel that my people support me. What we don't know, though, on the outside looking in, is what Black media knows about Lenny Kravitz. And I thought that this quote, written by the Black journalist, media critic, and media professional Feminista Jones, was a really, really great addition to this conversation. Anybody from the outside looking in can say, oh yes, Lenny does have a point. He wasn't at those shows, so yeah, they don't really support him. But looking through the information that she presented, it became very clear that Lenny's opinion of his career and how he has been accepted and how he has been honored by Black audiences was an extremely biased opinion. Also, she brought up on her page, and I got this from Threads, so if you're on Threads, you can go and you can see her. I will link her Threads account below. But she also brought up the fact that when you would look at Lenny's videos, there would be a lot of Blackness missing from his videos. And it is a solid rule when it comes to Black audiences that if we don't see ourselves represented, we will not show up. And so I think when you have a creator or an artist, as in Lenny's case, make a comment like this, it's like, okay, fine, but how much did you do to make your space and enjoying your art comfortable for Black audiences? You can't just expect, and this is something I've learned about being a creative that does things publicly, you can't just expect to do everything for yourself. Some things have to be done in collaboration with and for your audience. In order to be a successful creative, it is really a collaborative venture between you and your audience. And so if you're not seeing certain people, if you're not getting certain invitations, it's important to look at yourself first before you start pointing fingers at whoever's around you. And I thought to myself, I said, I don't remember Lenny ever jumping on a song with, back in the day, let's say he jumped on a song with Lil' Kim. Okay, so I'm the first person that will say I'm wrong when I'm wrong, okay? And in this situation, I'm wrong. Lenny Kravitz actually did do a lot of collaborations. He worked with Jay-Z, he worked with Tyrese. He has done his part, I think, to try and contribute to the art in a way that he might have been an organic addition to these spaces. But if what Feminista Jones has to say is true, then there is a possibility that he was reached out to, or, certain media publications tried to talk to him and maybe he rejected it at the time. I also want to point out that none of the collaborations he did turned out to be hit songs. I can't think of a single song that Lenny Kravitz has done that was one of his hits that I would categorize as being something that I would see celebrated at the Source Awards or at the BET Awards. Now, that's not to say it doesn't deserve to be celebrated, because he's a Black artist and he is doing, by default, Black music. But there is definitely a certain sound that is popular in those spaces. And if you want to be accepted in those spaces, you can't accept everybody to come to you. You kind of have to go to them. And that is unfortunate, but that's how these things work. And so I do think his frustration is valid, but I also think that it's what I'm personally questioning, what did you expect? And what I think is more important, and what he should probably highlight, is that he has been able to walk his own path. He has been able to have a very specific kind of career and be his own individual and be successful. And so, not all forms of success look the same way. And I think that he should, I think gratitude is important. And I think it's, highlight the fact that everybody can't always get in, but it's not going to change it. I remember a couple years ago when Beyonce wanted to perform her song Daddy Lessons at the CMAs, and people wanted to boycott that because she had an idea, she sang that country song and she's a Black woman and she's Beyonce singing on the CMAs, and it was a whole thing. So, certain spaces have rules. They have a social code. They have an auditory code. And they just have things that will and will not fly in those spaces. And I think you have to be honest with yourself about the type of art that you're producing. Yes, it would be nice if everything was an open door, but the reality is that it's just not. So, honestly, without completely invalidating him or people who feel like him, I would just say, don't take it so personally and focus on the spaces that do allow you in with no friction or obstacle. And that's how I feel about Lenny. Okay. Let's get to Winnie. Like I said, I deeply empathize with her, not because I agree with her or I agreed with what she had to say, but because I know what it's like to be in the middle of a pylon. I know what it's like to be a creator that thinks that I can just share my opinion and it'll be fine, and get your ass handed to you by the entirety of the internet. I knew something might happen with Winnie a couple of months ago. I was scrolling through TikTok from my lurking account and I came across her content. And at first I was like, how's she getting away with this? Because a lot of it was about dating, how hard it was for her to date. She was having a hard time on the dating apps. She was going through it. And yes, that is fun content to take in. Yes, it's very relatable. But as a Black woman doing dating content, it's also very, very dangerous for you as a creator, because very quickly audiences can go from, oh my God, yes, so relatable, we love you, to, you are always complaining. If it's not one thing, it's another. Why don't you try? You know what? I've seen it happen to me. It happens to other creators. If you are telling a story and you're talking about your dating life and you're always complaining, people will get compassion fatigue. People will start trying to fix you. And if they can't fix you, they'll start complaining about you. And when they start complaining about you, it means they want you to be quiet. So while I feel like people should be allowed to use their platforms for whatever they want, consider your audience, consider their experience when they are interacting with your content. And you have to know when it comes to sharing, when enough is enough. And I think sharing that kind of content and getting the response and getting people that relate to you, it can get very, very addictive. And so I'm going through Winnie's profile and I'm like, it looks like she's in the time right now where she's sharing, she's getting feedback, she's sharing. I mean, she would go live after dates. She would go live before dates. Like, she was really, really entrenched in whatever she was doing. So initially, I was happy for her. I was like, well, you know what? Somebody can do it. Good for her. And then I followed her for about 3 days and I said, oh, I am out. There's only so much that I can take of this. I understand, and while I find it relatable, it's not content I want to take in all the time. Now, that's not all she does on her page. She also does hair content. She also does makeup content. So she really does all around, like, lifestyle, whatever. But the big bulk of her content was dating content. And I was like, I'm good. So I unfollowed. However, whenever she would come up on my For You page, which is how TikTok works. So if you watch something even one time, it'll keep serving it up to you until you either block the creator, you block the content, you do whatever, right? So I kept seeing Winnie, and whenever I would see her, I would listen to what she had to say or just scroll past. I was like, she's not really for me right now. Moving on. Then she posted a video last week where I see her saying, a lot of people didn't understand what I said the other day, and it's not that hard to understand. And I was like, ooh, what's this? It's very common for you to get a video on that app where somebody is apologizing or talking about a response they got to a video, and you don't even know what that is. You have no idea. You don't know who this person is. Whenever people start creating content, we need to be way more open about what the worst is that can happen when you misstep, right? Because I think that would stop a lot of people from misstepping. And when I went back and I looked at Winnie's original video, that's something that I saw. One of the first things she said was, I'm going to say something kind of controversial, and I don't care because I feel like it needs to be said. And then she said, it's better to have a white audience than to have a Black audience because Black audiences don't know how to support their own. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, this won't go well for her. And so what followed was about 72 hours of TikTok stitches, responses, her comment section filled with, hate, get off the internet, we don't like you, you wanted supporters that were white, well, now that's all you'll have because we're not supporting someone like you. Her video got taken over to Twitter where they dragged her. And then people started coming up from her past that were trying to defend her. Hey, the reason why she would say something like this is because we were raised in a predominantly white neighborhood. And, Winnie associates power with having a proximity to whiteness. And, she's wrong for that, but it's because of her past. And people were like, you don't need to go down with her. Get away from her. And it was very, very volatile. And it was going on for about 72 hours. At this point, it's died down. But that moment will continue with her. She will always be associated with it. And it was completely avoidable. Most of the time, when people talk online, they talk and there's this idea that they're going to be able to put their story, their opinion out there, and people will just receive it, accept it, and move on. And that could not be any further from the truth. Audiences in general are extremely reactive. In regular everyday life, we have to push our emotions down. We can't go off the handle. When you're talking to your boss at work, you're talking to coworkers, you can't just be your most emotional self. But sign up for an internet account, get yourself a username, use a picture of yourself or don't. And now all those emotions that you weren't letting out, all that behavior that you would never display in real life, you can bring it online. And people bring it to comment sections, and they bring it to internet forums, and they bring it to chat room, and they bring their emotions. Very rarely are people on the internet going to act better with you than people in real life. The internet offers a way people can be anonymous, so they can let out just whatever they feel anonymously. And you, content creator, or whomever is deciding to speak up, and you don't have to be Jackie Ina to be a content creator. The second you post yourself and you publish yourself, your life, your voice online, you're now a content creator, okay? And so now all of these anonymous eyes and brains and feelings and emotions, now they're on you. And they are reactive as hell. So this idea that I'm going to go online where I can really be myself and I feel free. Please understand that it also comes with an incredibly reactive populace that is watching you, and that a lot of times is not going to just let you say whatever you want to say, give you the nuance or the objectivity, or do you the favor, the grace of hearing your incredibly bad take and just scrolling past it. That's not what's going to happen. Most of the time, people even come to the internet looking for shit to react to. It's never just going to be like, literally, I think before anybody posts online, run it through like 4 or 5 people, especially if what you have to say is attacking an entire group of people. And that's my second point here. It was avoidable because common sense should tell you not to attack Black audiences. First of all, when has that ever worked well for anyone? Also, Black women take supporting Black women on social media very, very seriously. Black women have a desire, and this is just what I've observed, to support and uplift our own. So there are a lot of things that go into that, and there are a lot of things that go into being good enough to receive that support. But once you've received it, it's very, very hard to separate yourself from those audiences. Like, you have to make a big mistake. You have to be extremely offensive. Now, you might not get the same amount of support as someone else, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But a lot of times, if you're a Black creator and you're female, most of your audience is going to be Black women. Just to share a few bright spots in how I've been supported as a Black creative by other Black women. Last year, which was it was a really great year for my creative career, at least when it comes to monetarily speaking. But last year, I'm just going along, minding my business, and I get Cash App. And I look at it, and it was for a decent amount. And I was like, what is this? And I saw that someone wrote a note, and they said, "Thank you for telling your story." And I was like, oh, okay. Another example is once I was on a trip with a friend last year when I went up north, and we got off a train in Connecticut, and I was stopped by someone. They said, "Stephanie?" And I was like, "Are we cousins?" I didn't know. And she goes, I'm one of your patrons and I'm a subscriber. Keep telling your stories. And I was like, okay. When I would go out, last year, I used to try and be social quite a bit. I would be stopped and people would say, "Hey, thank you for telling." And it was usually 99% of the time, it was Black women. And so I think that it's important as a creative, even if you're frustrated, to acknowledge the fact that Black women do and tend to do a lot of labor when it comes to supporting other Black female creatives. Now, they can flip that support too. And a lot of times Black women are the first haters of Black female creatives, but we won't talk about that in this video. We're keeping it positive. I want to also say that whenever you are, as a person, whenever you're doing a job in general, it's very easy to get frustrated with how you think that job should go. So in Winnie's case, when people did a little bit more research, they found out that a lot of the reason why she said what she said is because she did a sponsored post with Macy's and the post didn't do well. Anybody that does sponsored videos knows that if the content of the video is not good, people are not going to support the sponsored post. And one of my issues with doing sponsored posts sometimes is trying to find a video topic and concept that people will actually want to watch that lines up with the post. Sometimes it's very tricky, but when people go watch a post, just because it's sponsored doesn't mean they have to be interested in it. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of content creators have to learn. Like, if your audience shows up for the content of your video, they don't show up to have things sold to them, right? And so if the content of your video is not something that they are really interested in, then they're not gonna support it, which is why it's good to sometimes hide a sponsorship in a video that people really, really like and want to watch. And you can't take it personally when sponsored posts don't do well. And if you see it not doing well, instead of attacking your audience, a great thing to do is post something that says, "Hey, can you guys help me out? I just go click it, give it a watch. Thank you so much." and people will do it. I know I would do it, and I have done it for people. Oh, hey, I didn't see that. Let me go and click on it. I think, though, what happens is we've really built up this concept of being a content creator. We built it up to be this idea of something that you can do relatively easily. People still think the job is so simple and so easy because it's not a 9-to-5 in an office with a boss. And so it's just, first of all, it's not a real career. It's not a real job. And second, everybody who does it is spoiled and getting to the bag and living life high on the hog, which is not true. And I think a lot of content creators also get it into their minds that, you know, if I'm doing this and this, and I'm able to have this audience and this, then I should also have A, B, C, D. And what's interesting about the internet is instead of it being more like a strict meritocracy, the internet is kind of like a vending machine where each of us have the same dollar and we put our dollar into this machine, but people get different things out because the value of our dollars is different. Everybody's content is just not worth the same to an audience. And that's just a hard pill you have to swallow as a creator. So while you might feel that you're giving people something that they should respond to in ABCD way because you see, hey, it's working for this person and this person, I have found that actually sitting back and looking at why they're having more support instead of just assuming, oh, they should be supported. You know, I should be supported just as much as them. I'm doing the same thing. Are you? Instead of pointing fingers at your audience, sometimes you really have to look at yourself. What am I doing that would cause me not to have as much support? The truth about your performance is not going to be in the hate. It's not going to be in the hype. It's going to be somewhere in between. No, you don't have to be like everybody else online. But I think when you're doing something and it performs so far underneath what your contemporaries are doing, instead of pointing the finger at audiences and being like, you guys just don't know how to support, what are they doing that works? And why is it performing so much better than you? It's a question you need to ask yourself. When you put yourself out there, you're already very vulnerable. So it's easy to get defensive. It's easy to get upset. But in order to be successful and to keep yourself from flaming out, you do have to be critical, especially when it comes to the concept of support. And I also want to visit this subject really quickly. There are certain things that the Black community supports that if you did have a predominantly white audience, you would never get away with. So for example, Winnie had made videos talking about her hair, going to get her hair done at different hairstylists and wanting to jump in the conversation about Black hairstylists. Her videos were not taken very well, but a white audience is not going to want to listen to you talk about getting a silk press. That's not what they're there for. They don't want to hear that. But you can explain that to a Black audience. So if you had a predominantly white audience, you wouldn't be able to talk about that stuff. When you ask for a whole new demographic to see you, you're asking also to be inserted into that demographic's code and what works for them and what they will agree to and what they will not agree to. And that may not be something that you want. So I just think in general, content creators, and Winnie is not the first person that this happened to, and she won't be the last. And it was all avoidable. I do think that one of the interesting things about having a voice on social media that gets elevated is that a lot of times it would seem as if you get elevated to not only receive praise, but to also be an example for some type of trait that a lot of people can relate to that either needs to be noticed or needs to be criticized and examined more heavily. So it's always interesting to me when somebody rises really quickly. I'm like, how's it going to go for them? Are they going to be praised or are they going to be persecuted? What's going to happen? And usually pride comes before the persecution. This idea that I'm growing, I'm doing so well, I'm owed so much. What's wrong with everyone? Then people take a look at you. And when they took a look at Winnie, they found there's a history of kind of anti-Blackness. There's some issues. There's some things that she probably needs to deal with that go deeper than just frustrations with dating or the hair salon or a day in her life, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not necessarily a microscope you want a lot of strangers to have on you. I wish that there was a manuscript or a book that didn't tell content creators how to build followers. It didn't tell you how to make 6 figures in a month, but it told you this is how you need to regulate your emotions. This is how you need to manage your expectations. This is how you need to handle comparison. This is how you need to talk to your audience when you're feeling frustrated. These are the people you need to have in your corner offline that you bounce ideas and concepts off of before you broadcast them out into the world because you think you don't care. You think you don't care how people respond. You think you don't care what people are going to say, but you will. You will. And it's not a moment that you want or that really you deserve to have. Because I'm sorry, no matter how terrible you are, you don't have to be the internet's dartboard. You don't have to be the internet's piñata. You can be terrible offline. At the end of the day, all audiences support creators and creative work that they feel resonates with them. And Black audiences are no different. When it comes to being a Black woman who is a content creator, other Black women, I know this for a fact, take supporting us very, very seriously. And if they don't support you, there's normally reasons. Some of them you can help, some of them you can't. You're just not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But there's ways to handle how you struggle and how you deal with that. And the way to not do it is to just lash out and point fingers at your audience, especially when you're on a public platform where an algorithm can pick you up, people can paste it to other algorithms, and overnight you can become the internet's laughingstock. If you saw this unfold, what were your opinions on it? Please feel free to tell me in the comments box below. And as always, thank you for watching.